You're listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I have spent the past 3 days at the Outdoor Retailer Trade Show. My plan was to record a podcast at the show, do a whole bunch of flyby interviews throughout the days, and make something similar to what I did at the Red Bull Rampage. But that didn't happen. To tell you the truth, a lot of things didn't happen. Between seeing old friends, drinking a ton of beer, and checking out all the new products at the show, my time and voice were spent, and I didn't get around to doing that live show. So if you were looking forward to it, I apologize it didn't happen, but I highly recommend that you check out the Outdoor Retailer Trade Show at some point because it is an experience. It's all the brands, all the reps, most of the media this year, which I'll talk about in a minute, and a whole lot of good times. It's one of those shows where you shake a million hands, you talk too much, you hustle your wares, and you try not to get sick. For me, the show was great. A lot of people are stoked on the podcast. I may have put my final 2 sponsors in place, which is really a tough thing to do because I only want to work with brands that I love. And speaking of brands that I love, going to this show confirmed everything that I keep telling you about the loyal sponsors that I have. I looked around and 10 Barrel was everywhere. They support so much in action sports, and anybody who was at the trade show could see their tentacles out there making sure a lot of cool shit happened in our space. I didn't get to connect with Andy and the team over there as they were really busy making more shit happen for next year, and all the things I've heard are pretty exciting. On top of all the things I heard, I was able to drink a lot of 10 Barrel as well, which is why it was a shame that Troy Michaels and Rescue Water was not at the show. Troy was actually celebrating his 40th birthday in Aspen, Colorado by hitting up the terrain park and doing all the tricks he did when he was 20. So happy birthday to Troy, and next year at OR, I will make sure I have plenty of Rescue Water on hand. Another sponsor of mine that was there was Evo, but I didn't really get to talk to Evo. They are so busy at this show that we just have beers when we're in Seattle and figure things out together. The one brand that I'd really never connected with in person is Spy Optic, and I spent a lot of time at the Spy booth. And when I spend a lot of time at places, sometimes I say a lot of things that are cringeworthy, and people don't get my sense of humor. But not with Spy Optic. That whole crew had the similar sense of humor. They could handle anything I was dishing out. It just confirmed why we were working together. Awesome to meet the crew over at Spy. Definitely use the code that you'll hear in their ad because it'll save you a lot of money. As far as what I did at the show, well, I had a few meetings, saw old friends, met a lot of new ones. I set up a ton of interviews with a lot of amazing people. I did one podcast after drinking for 8 hours, so it'll be interesting when I get around to editing that one. I'm sure I was slurring all over the place, and I apologize for that now. I also set up a little podcast summit of sorts. It was cool to talk to Mark Warner from the Low Pressure podcast and Adam Jabber from the Out of Bounds podcast about our shared experiences. While I make a point of not listening to their podcasts, I hear they're pretty good. And if you like the content that I put together, then you might like theirs as well. And I should say, the reason I don't listen to theirs is because the last thing I want to do is steal any material from them. And I hope that all podcasters make a point of doing things with their own style and flavor and not biting other podcasts. Those dudes are stand-up guys, and that was a cool part of the show for me. I also need to thank the crew from Elan Skis for an amazing dinner at the show. It was one of those dinners with seafood towers, fancy steaks, and a lot of strong drinks. And during all of this, in the middle of the restaurant, I broke my New Year's resolution a day early, and I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel good about it either, but thanks to Elan for an amazing night. I also want to thank Krista Dill for making sure I'm always taken care of at this show. This was my first year being working media at the show, which is funny because I didn't think I did too much work while I was there. But speaking of working media, the biggest story that came out of the trade show for me, and it wasn't a product story, had to do with the working media. I was at the show on day 1, and I saw a bunch of people from Powder, Transworld, and Snowboarder, and I was looking forward to having conversations with all of them. But then day 2 comes around, and I was looking around for some of these people to talk to, and I was made aware that they were already back in California, and that 10, the Enthusiast Network, had been purchased by the group that owns the National Enquirer, among a ton of other magazine brands. And I didn't really know what was going on from there. But it's scary when you're working for a brand that's selling your ads and creating your relationships at a trade show, and you have a new owner who says, change your plane ticket and get back to the home office for a company-wide meeting. In my experience, when you work for a company that's been acquired, when the acquisition happens, changes are made and they're made right away. And while change is not a bad thing in the long run, in the short term, it makes for a lot of good people losing their positions, some reorganization, and they don't look at you as a person. You're looked at as a number. I don't want to speculate on what's going to happen to all these publications because I have no idea, but I do know they have a lot of great people there, and I really feel for them. So that was the trade show for me. I did plan on staying through Friday night and going up to Icelantic's event at Red Rocks. I was going to interview some of the talent they had for their show, but then I realized that my son has a more important show. It was his first school play, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and if you have a kid, this is the kind of shit that you do not miss. It's the stuff you can never get back. So I changed my flight. I was a good dad, and I made the play, and opening night was amazing. I'm going to a matinee in just a couple hours to see it again, and if he had one on Sunday, I would go there as well. But I'm not. I'm going to go take him to ski lessons up at the summit at Snoqualmie. I will say that I think this is the longest intro I have ever recorded. So thank you for listening to it, and thank you for listening to the show. Now it is time for me to talk about this week's podcast. My guest is a former athlete that I used to manage, but he didn't really need or get that much management from me. I'm talking about Chris Booth, and Chris is an Australian guy who's been doing some of the coolest behind-the-scenes brand building in skiing. He is the Aussie dude that made Black Crow skis cool in North America, and he's recently left Black Crows to merge technology and skiing in a unique way with a company called Awayco. I could go on about that, but we'll let Chris do that in the interview. So now it is time to talk with Chris Booth. When I think of Chris Booth, I think of a dude that was on K2 back in the day and I traveled with, but I think of a guy today who has one of the best jobs in skiing. You're the commercial director for a brand that is arguably one of the most progressive in skiing these days, Black Crows. The brand went from 0 to 100 since 2006, and you were the first ever marketing hire in 2015. And you helped take a small, cool company and help deliver it to the world in the right way. So I'm so stoked for you. And then I do a follow-up email to get you on the podcast, and I get this message from you. So how can I put this? I no longer work at Black Crows. I know, right? So many feelings, so many good times. It's okay, I'm off to join a new project. I'm getting married, and life in Norway will be great. Your relationship with Black Crows will live on, I promise. And when I look at that, you go to a company called Awayco, and you had one of the best jobs in skiing, in my opinion. And what made you leave?
Good question. What made me leave was Awayco, really. I'm excited about it, I won't lie. And you see a lot of things working in the outdoor industry, things that come and go. And I can't tell you how much this thing just grabbed me when I first tried it as a consumer going on a surf trip. It was just the first time that I'd felt something really new in a while. And Black Crows has just been such a cool project to work on and such a great learning curve for me also professionally that they kind of go together. I mean, Black Crows, I've just spent 4 years really. And like you said, dream job, taking a brand that was kind of a baby and then expanding it around the world and adding the marketing function and telling this story and essentially kind of being in a company that just makes really good products that people care about. And Awayco is almost like an extension to that because Awayco is just about experiencing those products more. And that's where I was like, yes, the time for this has come. People want to travel without bags. People want to have more choice. And these guys have come to surfing and now skiing and snowboarding and also mountain bikes with the technology and the vision to actually go and make that happen. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Like, yeah, I was sitting very happily in Black Crows and everything has been going extremely well. But I just kind of felt like this came to me. I can't explain it any other way. It just came to me and it felt like I have to go and do this.
So this is a service that was at once, I think, a subscription service, and now there's a la carte options, and pretty much you're from Australia, so you would say hiring gear. I would say renting or demoing gear, but you pretty much fly into a place, you go to an affiliate, and you're able to pick up your gear. You do that with surf, and then do you decide to call the company and say, hey, I love the idea, I think I can help make it better, and you need to hire me?
Almost, actually, but not quite. I went on a surfing trip to Portugal with my fiance just last summer, and a friend of mine said, hey, check these guys out. And I saw that they had a local affiliate partner store using Awayco right where we were going on vacation in Ericeira. And so I thought, you know what, I'll just give this a shot. So I signed up. It was super easy. And I had one of those moments like the first time I used Uber or Airbnb or Netflix where I was just in the palm of my hands. I just had all these cool surfboards that I could just pick and hit reserve and then go into a store and pick them up. And I was like, holy shit, I can just do this. So I click on a board, I go into a store, I pick it up, and I didn't really know what to do because I just said, hey, I'm here and I've reserved a board. And they're like, oh, hey, Chris. Like, they even knew my name because they could see my reservation. They're like, hey, we've set it up for you this way. Like, have a good time. And then I took the board and I just left. It was weird because I just went into a store, picked up this cool board, and then left without feeling like I had paid because all that just happens automatically. And so I went surfing on this board, and that was cool. And then I took it back and I saw that the surf was changing the next day, like the swell was coming up. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just take another board. So I jumped back on the app and I took a bigger board, a little bit of a different shape. And I just grabbed that one and I surfed that one. And in the week that I was there, I ended up reserving 4 different boards. I had access to boards that kind of were good in any conditions. And so I tried all these quirky shapes, went into this store 9 times, got to know the guys, had beers with them at the end of the week, bought some stuff. They gave me directions on like where to get coffee, where to go surfing. And by the end of the week, I was just like, wow, like I felt local, like I got to know people, got directions. And at the end of the week, I was like, whoa, that was new. I've never felt that before as a consumer. Like it was not retail and it was definitely not rental. It was like a third way. And I thought, I want Black Crows to be able to do that for people. So I called them up initially to say, hey, like, are you guys interested in doing this in skiing and snowboarding? Because I work for this brand and I can really see this as working for us. This is our customer. So we just got talking, and as it turns out, they were thinking about doing that. And they even showed me some stuff that they were working on, and it was kind of fateful in that respect. So Black Crows ended up being the first brand partner to sign up to Awayco. And that was back in August last year. We just got working together a little bit and got to know each other, and they kind of shared with me their vision, and I got to meet a few of them. And in the end, I suppose I just got really enamored with the whole project and their vision and who they were. Because at the founder level, a couple of guys from Google who love to surf, love to ski, and just felt like it was time to make a world where you could travel with just a backpack, but know that when you get there, you have access to something that's the level that you want. And I was just like, yes, that's me. And that's a lot of people I know. And wouldn't that be great to not have to take my bag? If it's easy and it's on my smartphone and I have choice and all I got to do is pay a fee, I was like, well, why wouldn't I want to do that today? So yeah, in the end, I just really felt like this would be a meaningful thing for me to do personally, because it is a change that I would like to see in the world and I really would like to contribute to that. And I also saw just in the ski industry today, the economics are really challenging. You could even say broken in some areas, where the ski industry is actually pretty good at killing brands like Black Crows. And that's because the economics are difficult when you start to grow it a little bit. And the internet, while it is a great opportunity, puts real pressure on the cost of what a pair of skis should be, because it changes by the day. And retailers have seen a lot of brands come and go and are feeling a little less interested in taking risks on new brands. And so the industry is kind of getting a little bit consolidated and a little bit conservative, because it's all based on having to buy the ski every year. And while that's great and the industry does work like that, the needs that we have today, when we already have a lot of great skis, and it turns out they do last a couple of years, and turns out like a lot of us are traveling to ski, we already have skis, and selling the best ski for all conditions every year is great. But at a certain point, the consumer's expectation is going up, because what is the best ski that you can have? It's not any one ski. It's the best ski for the day.
Yep.
You know, if it snows 30 centimeters, the best ski on that day is a big rockered fat ski that you can go surf the mountain on. And if it hasn't snowed in 2 weeks and it's rock hard, the best ski is actually like an 82 millimeter piece ski that you can go play around on and do carve turns. And if there's a great park where you're going, the best ski is probably like a fun all-terrain park ski. So really the best ski is access to a quiver of skis and being able to chop and change, sample, and kind of discover. And Awayco kind of lets you do that.
And it takes cool nerds from Google to come put this idea together, and then they get a cool guy like yourself who has his finger on the pulse in the industry to help run the program. But how does the Black Crows team take it when it's like, hey, remember this group that I was telling you about, Awayco, that we're going to get skis in their program? Well, I'm actually going to leave this job and go work with them. How do they react to that?
Well, then imagine if the people in Black Crows were also some of your best friends.
Oh.
So it's been emotional, but thankfully in Black Crows, we all kind of have a tendency to sort of see things the same way. So Julie and Renier, who is shaping the skis in Black Crows and really one of the kind of core pillars of that company.
Legendary figure in general.
Yes, and very lucky to have him. When he saw it, I mean, he totally got it. He got the idea, like, yes, I want that. We should do it. That makes sense. And when I made the decision to leave, I think it was tough, but it also corresponds to a few other things I'm doing. I mean, I'm getting married. I'm moving away from Chamonix, where the head office of Black Crows is, up to Norway. And also, I think ultimately, like, we're friends, but we're professionals. And when we work together, we sort of respect the fact that we're all kind of journeymen. And I think if I was going to another brand or something, or like going to work in insurance or something like that, it would have been a bit different. But because this project is what it is, it was kind of like, wow, sad to see you go, man, but this looks great and we get it. In the end, I mean, I just finished last week and the feeling was good on the whole. And that company now is in a position where when I leave it, I'm really confident. I mean, the thing is just a rocket ship. Like, I've never seen a brand come out like that one, that people just see it and want it in the same way. Well, it has fans. I mean, Black Crows has proper fans.
Everything that you guys have been doing since I've started noticing it probably, I don't know, like 7 years ago or maybe even a little more, it just seems cool. And it's not like you're trying too hard. You're just making cool products that are simple but look great. And the people you have associated with the brand and where the brand pops up was unexpected when it first started, I feel like, but it was calculated on your end. And we'll talk about all that. But before we talk about all that, we're going to talk about your life a little bit and how you got into Black Crows. Now, are you born in Sydney?
Yeah, I'm born in Sydney.
And then Cronulla, is that where you grew up?
Cronulla, yeah. It's in the southern part of Sydney by the beaches.
Winters was all about skiing and summers were all about surfing. Is that how life went?
Actually, you know what? Winter was all about skiing on the weekends, and it's 5 or 6 hours drive from Sydney to the closest mountains.
Is that Perisher?
Perisher and Thredbo, yeah. And my parents have a ski shop, and they've had it for, I think, 33 years. They ran their ski shop, and they spent all the money they had on taking my sister and I skiing on the weekends. So winter looked like that. Like, mom would do one weekend, dad would do the next weekend. And then in the summer, the big trip we would do as a family was to go to, like, Silver Star in Canada or Whistler or Breckenridge and Vail. Our summer always had like a 3-week to month-long trip during our school holidays where they would take us overseas to go skiing. And so summer actually was skiing too. And summer's so damn long in Australia that every moment around those ski trips kind of felt like summer anyway. So I was lucky enough to grow up surfing and skiing with parents who felt that that was really important.
And owning a ski shop, I know retail world has gone up and down and skiing has peaks and valleys. How was it as a business? I mean, is it still going?
Yeah, it's still going and they're successful and I really respect them. I mean, they have their own business and it's a success and it made a great life for them and for my sister and I. And they're like my heroes. I mean, that's not easy. And they have gone through what everybody has gone through, which is consolidation of the industry and also, I wouldn't call it disruption, but just transformation with the expansion of internet sales. And they've just adapted. They run a bit of online business to complement their in-store business, and they do really well. To have any business for over 30 years is an achievement.
Yeah.
But to have a business that builds a life that is better for you and better for your kids than yours probably was is a monumental success. And actually, a ski shop has given them and given us all of that.
When the internet first came out, being a retailer, were they early adopters? Because I know in the States, there were a lot of dealers that were like, oh, this thing's not going to do anything. And the guys that didn't play online early, I don't think they're around anymore. Did your parents have any rough times with the beginning of online sales?
Yeah, I mean, I was maybe 14 years old and just telling them, like, guys, you've got to have a website. People need to be able to find you. People don't use phone books anymore. But they were really open-minded about it and just started really small. And now it's 20% of their business, which is really not nothing at all.
Yeah.
And their shop continues. And that really just gave me the confidence that, you can do what you're passionate about. And as long as you stay open-minded about what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, how that comes to pass can be flexible. And that's what's happening in the ski industry at the moment. The same amount of people ski as in 1991, actually going more and doing it differently. And the industry is there, but the way in which people want to experience the things that they love to do and how they buy the goods or how they rent the goods or where they go to use them is changing. So overall, like, the ski industry is really healthy, and my parents' story is a testament to that. But your individual destiny, I think, comes down to, like, how open are you to change, and how in touch with what your customers actually want and how they feel, and are you ready to meet them in the middle?
I can see that. So getting into your skiing, was there any programs for you? Was there racing at all in the beginning? Because I know you did get into bumps. Did you race before that?
I don't even remember. I think so. I think I hated it because it was all about bumps. That was about expression. And bumps was awesome back then because the jumps used to be in the moguls, and you used to have to, like, choose your transition, like 2 moguls down, 3 moguls down, and you'd have to hit that tranny perfectly twice in your line. It was really spontaneous and raw, and it was the cool thing. So all I wanted to do was bumps. So that's what I did for like a couple of years.
And you showed a ton of promise in there. I think you would have won most of the junior events that you were in, and the track was to head to the Olympics. That's my guess, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, it was all formalized like that, and I was on some sort of track. But to be honest, I got out of it before it could materialize. I think I was 11 or 12, and some guys went to the Whistler Glacier to go to a summer camp to ski moguls, and came back with some videos, which just blew my mind, changed my life. I even remember where I was sitting when I watched State of Mind, Degenerates, and like the Salomon 1080 video, and I saw these guys. It was like it came from another planet. It was like another language, and I was just like, wow. I think that was the point where, like, the whole equation got rewritten in my, like, adolescent brain of just like, wow, this is all possible. And then basically I remember the same day just going out and jumping off stuff and, like, pretending to be them. And I think that was the point where moguls, like, just stopped being relevant that day. And I just started imitating those videos at, I think, 11 or 12 years old. And yeah, everything changed. I don't think I ever was in an organized structure after that. I think I even quit the Moguls Club.
I look at it now, like, I mean, I skied bumps a little bit growing up, but I would never want to do a bump line anymore. My knees just can't take it, and it doesn't seem as fun as maybe when I was 12 years old. But do you look back and be like, yeah, I wish I would have been jumping more, or did jumping not even exist?
Well, I remember that the jumps, that was the part that I was best at. And the jumps were always the most interesting part. Like, the one guy in the comp would do the 720, and everyone would talk about the 720, and that was like the big thing. That was the most exciting part of bumps. It was at its peak, or just after its peak, after the Nagano Olympics. And it was raw. Just because of the way the courses were set up, you would come hammering into these crazy steep kicker things and then just, like, send it straight into a mogul field and have to have your timing exact. And there would always be that guy who would be, like, skiing faster than everyone else, and he was landing in a transition like 4 moguls after everyone else, and he would go off the bottom air and do a double twister spread or something like that, but just go so big, totally not big by today's standards, but big for that, and the whole crowd at the bottom would just erupt. And I just remember feeling that energy, that definition of freestyle, like guys who just see the course differently and do something really spectacular and innovative in that small environment, and just the response that everyone would have to that performance. That was always what inspired me in bumps. When I saw those videos and started to see the guys doing the tricks that they were doing in what was then called New School, it was just all that. The whole thing was just interpretation, innovation, and expression, which sounds academic, but that's really what it was. And it was just obvious that that was the answer to skiing. And straight away, moguls look stale by comparison.
Well, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to talk about my sponsors. And my first sponsor is Evo. And if you haven't been to one of their stores in Denver, Seattle, Portland, or Whistler, you are missing out on the best retail experience in snow. But don't worry. If you can't get to a store, you can find all the brands at the best prices over at evo.com. You'll also get a low price guarantee, free shipping on orders over $50, and a no-hassle return policy. Evo is different than your traditional retailers, and they're committed to creating a great experience for you, giving back to those who need it, and creating community. They make a difference in a space where most don't, and that's worth supporting. My next sponsor is Rescue Water, and if you're a listener of the show, you've heard me talk about how Rescue Water is proactive recovery. You've heard me tell you that there is nothing that will hydrate you better than a Rescue Water. But have you tried it? If you haven't, you're missing out on feeling better and more hydrated after a workout, a day on the hill, or doing whatever athletic endeavor you're into. And on the nightlife side, drink one Rescue Water before bed and you will feel 100% in the morning. Please do me and yourself a favor and pick up some Rescue Water next time you're at the store or on Amazon. If you head on over to rescuewater.com, you'll get 20% off a 12, 24, or 48 pack when you enter the code RescueWaterTPM, that's RESQ Water TPM, all one word at checkout. Those are my sponsors so we can get back into it. Did you ever end up going to any of the camps at Whistler?
Yeah, I did. I went to High North Ski Camp.
The best one.
Oh my God. High North was like the North Pole of that movement. I mean, I was coming from Australia too. Like, skiing is not even serious in Australia. And free skiing was just completely niche. I mean, there was probably 2 guys in Australia who went to the Whistler Glacier who even knew about it. So for me, I was coming out of obscurity straight into High North Ski Camp, where there's like all the guys in the video were there.
Yeah, they all work it. All those guys.
Yeah, all the guys. All the legends today of the sport. They were all there skiing. And I was just like, oh my God, this is just crazy. And they had the whole setup and the pirate flag. And I remember meeting Shane Zox and feeling all timid. And Anthony Baranowski was there as a digger. And Cruson was there. And all the stars who weren't even like working there or as being coaches would all come and ski there. So that was really like the central point of energy for the whole movement back then. And I just remember going there for like a week or 2, being a camper and skiing in the slush and just learning something new every day and just getting really shy around like all these heroes. I think I went like 2 years in a row, and that was like a really defining moment of going there and just being exposed to all of that. I think I was like 12 and 13 years old.
Yeah, so that's like what, like 99-ish?
No, it would have been like 2001. It wasn't the true founding days of High North. Like, it was already getting pretty big, and there was like hundreds of campers coming through over those 4 weeks, and I was one of them. So it was already pretty legit, but it was still very much the place to be.
It was the epicenter of everything that was new. There was a few different camps up there, but High North, led by Shane Zox, was the pinnacle of all that. It seemed a little bit looser than maybe some of the others, and just the way it was run, and it was really, really fun time for everyone. You leave High North and you go back to Australia and you get back on snow there, and I would think you're light years above everybody else just from what you're learning every day at camp.
Yeah, that camp and the trampoline that my parents bought me for my 10th birthday, which was like a round one. And back then, no one had those round ones. And I just jumped on that thing every day, I swear, after school. And I just learned how to do all the flips and all the variations by just practicing. And then I found that it was just really, really easy to do them on skis. All you had to do was know how to pop and have some edge control. And it was more or less the same. So like after High North, just started like experimenting and like would learn like 3-4 tricks a day. Like, it was just crazy and fun and mind-opening to just go, wow, I guess you can just do this and just try, do, crash, learn, try again. And it all came really quickly. So I sort of got my head around all the tricks that I even knew existed from the videos in about a season. And it was really lucky time because I think I was 13 years old, and that was the time when skiing was really starting to pump and contests were springing up everywhere, not just the national ones and the X Games and like the bigger tours and the US Open, but they were becoming regional and local.
So you had a little circuit in Australia?
Yeah, there was like big air circuits. They even had an X Games there for a while, and there was like a community starting, but there was so few people in it that if you could land like a cork 7 or, you know, a switch 5 or some of these fundamental tricks, you were straight away like at the top. I was just very lucky because it didn't take long to learn the tricks. There weren't a lot of guys doing it, and there was a lot of energy coming into the sport and enthusiasm as being the future. So like these 3 forces at the same time kind of gave me a really lucky break to just kind of get going I think there was a Red Bull competition organized in Australia one year. And
It was the air raid at Falls Creek. You were 15.
yeah. And like first prize was like 10 grand.
5.
And I was 13 years old and I went in it and I won. And I was like $10,000. Like I didn't even know what that was. So I was very lucky to do some of these contests in the adult division because there wasn't any other division, but get in and have success from a very early age. And then I think that was just the beginning of a really lucky decade of skiing with the great sponsorship support, a lot of travel, and basically just a defining moment in my life that just pivoted away from being like a suburban kid growing up near the beach in Sydney to being able to travel the world alone with these teams and do videos and contests. Yeah, it changed everything.
At about 14, I think it's like 2000, you get hooked up with K2, which at the time, Shane Zox is on K2, and it's a very progressive brand, especially in the new school movement of skiing. For an American company to pick up a kid from Australia, it's a tough thing to do because it's hard to say, hey, we're going to blow this dude up unless you become the best skier in the world. How do you end up getting on K2?
The first High North camp I went to, the guys at Freeze magazine plucked me out and put me in this photo called like Class of 2002 or 2003. And it was all like the young guns of the new school scene. And they're like, hey, do you want to come and join this photo? Like it's in a basketball stadium. And that was it. I just showed up. And I ended up being in the magazine and having a little profile. And I was in this group of all these super pros who were young.
Are you shitting your pants that you're getting this exposure?
Yeah. And I was like sunburned and I'm like got pimples. And I was like, whoa, how did I get here? And following that, the guys at Rossignol called and said, hey, we saw this article in the magazine and, you know, we really want to have you. And do you want to be sponsored by Rossignol? And I was like calling from my parents' house in Australia, talking to this guy from the industry in the US. And I was just like, yeah, okay. I didn't even know what that meant. So I was sponsored by Rossignol for a year. And then the second High North camp I went to, I met the guys at K2 and they said, well, we'd really love for you to come and be on K2. Are you interested in switching? And for me, that was like the consecration of like a dream because K2 was then the pinnacle. It was the thing that made you relevant. If you had K2s on your feet and you were sponsored for that, that meant something then.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, of course. And I don't even know how it ended with Rossignol. I think I was too young to even realize. And I think it might have been Zox who was behind it because he was always really kind to me and kind of looked after me. And the first skis I had, it was the enemy, which then became the public enemy. And the enemy was red, it was directional, and it kind of looked like some other skis in the range. And then a year later, the K2 team all went to SIA and had a meeting. They asked me to come along, and they asked all of us, what do you want? What is that? Pep was there. I think even Turpin was using K2s back then.
Yeah.
Turpin.
We had that whole glacier on lockdown, it seemed like.
Yeah, K2 owned that place. And it was like, what do you want? It was like, well, it has to be a true twin. It needs to be mounted center or near center. The tips and tails need to be bulletproof so the ski never delaminates. Because back then, skiing park was just hammering skis. And it needs to feel urban. We want like a street scene. And it needs to cut across both skis. And they basically went out and made exactly that. And that was the public enemy. That was like the team ski that we all used. And I was on K2 from about that point until I was 20. Yeah, 6 years.
It was all based on competitions back then. I think it was 2001 or late 2001, early 2002 that you find out that you're going to get your first X Games invite. That has to be the biggest thing that could possibly ever happen to you.
I think it was the second year that they had the official X Games qualifier in Breckenridge. I went to Whistler actually for about 2 weeks. So I flew from Australia from the summer, full-on heat wave. I remember leaving the airport in a ball of sweat. Go to Vancouver, stayed with Julian and Anthony and JP for 2 weeks, who I'd gotten to know through High North. They told me that this qualifier competition was on. So I called my dad and told him about it. And he said, right, I'm going to come over and we'll go. This is going to be awesome. So he flew from Sydney to LA and met with me at Denver Airport. And we went and did this X Games qualifier competition. And it was massive. There was 600 entries or something crazy like that.
Whoa.
And the level was already getting super high. It was back when like you didn't have the internet. So the only way to understand the progression was to watch the videos, and every year was a big step, and then actually go to the contest and just see the number of kids swell. And every year there was like so many good guys coming out of nowhere who had all the tricks. And you were just like, oh my God, this is so intimidating. So I did this event, and I think it went over 2 days to get everybody through 2 runs down that course in Breckenridge. I made it to the super final, which is you had 1 run, which was super hard because at the bottom of the course, there was this big curved C rail, which today is easy, but then getting to the end of it, everyone cheered. So I had my run, had a couple of 900s in it, some rail tricks, some just basically whatever I knew how to do. And I got the C rail in my qualifying runs, which helped me make the final. And in the final, I didn't make it all the way. Like I kind of fell off earlier and skied away. So I was like, oh, I'm out. I'm not going to make it. And if you got in the top 3, you got a ticket to the X Games. That was like your ticket out of obscurity into the spotlight. And X Games was the following week. So like if you got top 3, the next week you were going to Aspen and you were going to be on ESPN with the top 24 guys in the world.
That's insane.
People were hungry for this. And I remember it was competitive. And I finished my run and Dad was like, oh, good run, mate. Gave me a pat on the back, kind of feeling like, maybe not. But, you did so well. And I remember that they did the prize ceremony and they were like, in first place, Rory Bushfield, I think it was. I think he was first. In second place, I think it was Nicholas Karlstrom or someone like that, one of the Scandi guys. And then in third place, and like I kind of knew that I was in one of the better runs, and it was me and Rory Silva, actually, also on K2. And they said, Chris Booth. And it was like, whoa! And I was like, holy shit, like, do I really deserve that? And Rory was just crushed and didn't get in. But my ticket was done. I just squeezed in, and apparently by like 1/10 of a point or something, I got third. And so I was straight into the X Games the next week at 14 years old. So yeah, I was super young. And then all of a sudden in Aspen, in the tent with Travis Rice and all these superstars waiting for my run, and the cameras are around and you're getting your media prep and all the stuff that they do. And it was just, basically me and my dad hanging out there. And it was like, wow, well, that kind of all happened fast.
When this happens to a lot of kids, you could get a big head. I've known you for a long time, and I wouldn't think it really affected you as a person, the success, but I don't know because I wasn't hanging out with you a ton when you were 14 years old. Did it change you at all, or was it you still the same Chris?
It was just surreal because I never even did a full ski season. All the other pros who were doing movie parts and doing well in contests and stuff, it's a baseline that you ski all season. I would just come for a couple of weeks at a time and then I'd go back home and go to school. So it was just like living a split life. And it definitely did not occur to me that I was in any way even pro, because it just felt so strange. So I can say for sure that after getting to that level and getting the sponsors, and the sponsors even then were kind of crazy. Like Microsoft was all into it because they were launching the Xbox. So Microsoft sponsored me for a few years.
Whoa. Is that big money?
Yeah, I had to wear this Xbox patch on my jacket, and they paid me like $30,000 a year or something for 3 years, which was just like an unimaginable amount of money for me. It's probably cheap for Microsoft to get into the whatever it was they were trying to do.
That's double for you because you're Australian.
Back then it almost was. My mom took care of all of that and put it away in savings so I could not spend it all. I didn't even see it. I had all these sponsors, and I was sponsored by Sprite. This was like just when Red Bull was getting into the game, and they had sponsored a few guys, but it wasn't like it was today. So I got sponsored by Sprite and Oakley, and then the guys at Rip Curl came in. So I had all these sponsors, and I had no outgoings because I was just a kid living at home, going to school. So in a way, like, yeah, it does elevate you, and all these cameras come into your face and lights, and then there's all these pros, and you're suddenly in a different environment. But I can't say it ever gave me a big head, but I can say it gave me a sense of expectation that definitely made skiing less fun the following years.
You had to perform. You're getting paid.
I felt like I had to perform, yeah. And like every year after that, for about the next 3 or 4 years, I really felt like I really needed to be at that level always, or progress, because I was this sort of singled out kid who got to this level very fast. Mainly, I would put it down to luck, not pure luck, but I just happened to be doing a couple of things at the right time, at the right age, and a few things went my way, and it just really accelerated from there. And then I would go back home and go to school, and like in Australia, you wear school uniforms, like in old English society. So I'd go and put my school uniform on and go back to school and just be but completely suburban and normal and everything like that. So just a strange cost to have as a kid and figure out how to deal with that. And I wouldn't say I felt like I was a star at all, but I did feel that the following seasons, skiing felt more like an expectation to perform. That ultimately resulted in a string of injuries over 3 seasons, 2 blown knees and a broken jaw and teeth season after season. And that really slowed me down.
Around 2002, you ended up 5th at the X Games. And then 2003, you blow your knee. It's like flat light. You don't make the channel gap and splat. That's your season. The next year, you break your arm in February. What happened with the jaw and teeth? Because I don't have that in my notes.
Yeah, I went with Chris O'Connell, photographer and one of the first guys in Armada, one of the big photographers at the time. And I went with him and Christy Leskinen on a shoot to go and do Chad's Gap. So I went and we did Chad's Gap the first day. We just literally got into the airport, drove up, is it Gunny's Gulch, whatever it's called, and toured up. And there was Charles Garnier and Jamie Pierre who were there. And I guess they had been in contact with Chris, who said, come and shoot this. So they had built this jump and the in-run, and Christy and I just showed up literally from the airport, fresh legs. And I walked up the in-run and did Chad's Gap a couple of times. And then the next day we had a few days free. So Chris was like, hey, do you want to go do some urban stuff? And I'd done a couple urban spots. You know, I hadn't done that much. It was all park. But I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So we did one spot, a pretty easy handrail, and that was fine. And then the next spot we went to was brand new because it was just behind the new state library or city library of Salt Lake City. And Mikey LeBlanc had been there like 2 days, 3 days before. And it was this flat down concrete ledge. On one side was stairs, and on the other side was this like drop down into like a underground car park entry. So it was like a 2-story drop onto a concrete driveway. And Mikey, he just made a little ollie pad. So it was like a bit of a ollie on. So it made it a little harder. And I guess at the time I thought, you know what, I'm just going to ollie onto this thing. Because back then everyone was building these huge jumps onto rails. And that was kind of like not as cool as like making it really minimal.
Yep.
So I was like, no, I'm just going to ollie on. And I was more of a natural right foot forward on rails guy. I don't know why, because I snowboard natural, surf natural, but on rails, right foot forward or goofy was like my preferred way. And this one meant that if you wanted to get on it naturally instead of lip slide it, you needed to do it left foot forward. So I was like, I'm just going to ollie on and I'm just going to slide this in my unnatural way and just wing it. So that's about the last thing I remember. But basically, I ollied on, went down the first part, through the kink, and then I think I got back seat after the kink, and then slipped out on the second part of the ledge, and I think fell down into the driveway 2 stories below, and broke my arm and broke my jaw and broke my teeth.
Oh, that was all the same thing.
Yeah, and so really all I remember is waking up in the ER in Salt Lake City University Hospital, and I remember hearing a bunch of people screaming. And actually, I was in like the ward with a bunch of overdose cases of people having withdrawals and going crazy. But I just remember waking up, not knowing where I was in this ER ward with like all these voices screaming around me. So it was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, and you're like a young kid too. It's not like you're old yet.
I was 16 years old or 15 years old. So that ended that season.
From 14 to 20, you're on K2. You were expected to compete, and you did. And in the early years, from what I saw, you were super relaxed. You were the comedian of the group. You're always funny in a smart kind of way, but had everybody laughing. I don't know if anything happened in your brain after the injuries, but I feel like it did, because as you got older, I feel like you might have lost the relaxed vibe maybe and psyched yourself out in contest situations. And is that just my thought process, or did that really happen?
I think you're right. But I would call it more like pressure and lack of preparation. Because I was not doing a season, I never really had that much time to train. So these events would come up, or these like film shoots would come up, and I would be in Australia. So I would just get on like a 24-hour flight, get off the plane, grab my gear, and then go to this contest the day before, or like go to this film shoot. And I just lacked that timing that you get when you've been like training and prepping. And so I found myself going straight into these contests and like doing like all my best tricks I knew how to do and pushing it without that. And I think that also added pressure on me. And it was all just getting a bit less fun because I could do this stuff, but I didn't have enough time because I was going to school. And it was a lot of pressure because everyone, brands, people, myself, sort of all expected me, having kind of made it to the top level very, very young, to fulfill the prophecy of being the Tanner Hall type, which I never became, right? Because him and I had a similar thing where he got in the spotlight really quick. And And I was like one of the next ones after him in that kind of group. There was guys like Simon Dumont, who went on to become an absolute icon and legend. And there was a point where they all just continued to evolve and really accelerate onto another level. And I just got injured and I wasn't always available to do those film shoots. And so I kind of sensed that I was slipping back a little bit compared with them. And I think that gave me a little bit of pressure. And I remember at some point just asking myself, is this still fun? Am I still having fun doing this? Because I feel like I'm doing this stuff and doing these tricks because I have to, because that's what I need to live up to. And I won't lie, like I was wishing that I could just go and spend a season and just train and be there for all the cool stuff that I was getting invited to. But in the end, like I had to go home and go to school. I didn't do homeschool and I didn't drop out. I went and did that. And that was very difficult to balance, even then.
So at that point, the trips are the fun part and the skiing is almost the part you're apprehensive about or you have to think about more. It's like, hey, I'm going to see all my friends and that's great, but then I have to do this contest.
Yeah, I guess every contest came with a sense of expectation that I had on myself to continue to be at that level. Because if you start slipping back, then it's like, oh, maybe he didn't really turn out the way it looked like he was going to. And I think I felt that. It seems like a strange thing to think, but, I was just a teenager. And I remember thinking like, wow, like this stuff hurts. It's hard to come in at these contests straight up with cold legs and just like throw down your runs and be at the top level. Like that's really hard. And, I was getting these injuries and they certainly weren't fun. And skiing was really sorting itself out at that stage. There was already becoming two schools of style. And one style was scoring really well and the other one wasn't. And because I was in K2, I was really in that ecosystem where style ruled all. And there was like a certain catalog of tricks and grab variations that were really like what Pep and Andy Mayer and these guys were really pushing. Guys like Chris Benchetler as well, like classic style master. We all had a similar look. And those tricks and those variations, they weren't scoring as well. And I was really going with that because I really felt it was the most beautiful and functional way to ski at the time. And I was noticing that, I would put down a run and it had big rotations in it relative to what was big at the time. Switch 9, cork 10, switch 9 the other way, like that level, which was at the level that should be putting you in the top couple of guys. But the way I was doing it, or maybe my skis weren't crossed or whatever, I just remember it not scoring as well as I kind of thought it would, which is, looking back on it, just totally normal. But I remember thinking like, man, these contests are not that rewarding. And when's the last time I just really felt the joy of it?
Yeah.
And that was when I decided to go to Europe, go skiing with Julian, go make jumps into powder and start doing that more.
And then you get to film with MSP. I think it's for Yearbook. And you film with them, I don't know for how long in the season, because I don't think you have a ton of footage with them, but it doesn't make the actual movie. And you're in the bonus segment of it. But what does that do to your psyche where you film with these guys, you get some tricks, you get the DVD, you're psyched to see yourself, and then you're in the bonus feature?
Yeah, good question. I think I kind of took all of that in my stride because I only actually dedicated a week to it. I remember them coming to me and saying, we would really love you to be in our film. And I was absolutely overjoyed with that. But then to commit to that, you need to be available from mid-January to like late April to do your part and to be at those shoots. And I remember going, I'm not going to be able to do this because that's when I have to go to school. So I participated in one shoot at Keystone for about 4 days and did the jump and the features and stuff that were set up. And that was great. But then I had to go back home and go to school. And so I don't ever remember thinking that I was going to be this big player in this film and have this part, because I just remember that was, in my mind, a little bit of a lost opportunity, but there was ultimately nothing more I could do about it. Yeah, I was kind of bummed because you didn't really see or know what was going to happen. There was an element of surprise. And when the film would come out, you would see your part. So when it wasn't even in that film, I was like, oh, man, well, that's kind of hard because, like, they asked me, they came to me. And I ultimately just wasn't able to fulfill their schedule of filming to have enough footage to actually go in it and for it to make sense. So it was more a kind of a confirmation that at that stage, I think I might have been 17, 18, that it was time for me to make skiing fit with my life and do the things that I really wanted to do in it and not really worry too much about chasing the things that you feel you ought to do, whether it be this contest or that contest or shooting that film, and just go and do something that improves my skiing and be with the people that I really want to be with. And I actually think it was the season after that I decided not to go to the US all season and decided to go and live with Julian in France and ski with him and do stuff in France.
When you're skiing for an American company like that and you're an Australian, do you ever feel like the focus is on North America and maybe the brand didn't do as much as they could for you? I feel like if you were born on U.S. soil or you lived in the U.S. for a year, there would be a lot more marketing behind Chris Booth. But did you feel that being in Australia that, hey, if I was to dedicate time over there, I could be much bigger?
Well, in the beginning, it was the opposite because being Australian just made you different. Being young and being Australian, being able to do it made you different. And so it really accelerated sponsorship and opportunities in the beginning. But you're right. Towards the end, I noticed that contact with K2 was less and less frequent because I wasn't always available. I wasn't always at the front of things. And if you understand how a company works and why companies sponsor athletes and why they sponsor videos and events, it's to build and support culture that ultimately leads to sales, and sales makes money. And if you're an Australian guy who doesn't really come to the US that much and your sales are in the United States, then it's just logical that maybe you're not the most attractive athlete against others who are on your team. So those opportunities naturally flowed to others, probably more than they flowed to me. I did feel that for sure from time to time, but I wouldn't say it was like a massive disadvantage. And I would never say that the industry ever did anything hard by me. And the industry has only ever given me great things. It's given me a whole life.
I'm going to take one more break to talk about sponsors, and I'm going to start with Spy Optic. Spy has been around since 1994, so they have a long history supporting snow sports. And this year, they've produced the best goggle ever made, the Ace EC. That's a bold statement, but it's 3 lenses at the push of a button. I used it this weekend on a day where we had sun, we had snow, we had clouds, and 3 lens options meant I never had to think about changing my lenses while my friends were pretty much screwed. The Ace EC is a game changer, and you're going to have to pay full price for the best goggle in the world. But to save 20% on everything else Spy, head on over to spyoptic.com, place your order, then use the code capital TPM, the number 20. That's all one word, and you will get that 20% when you check out. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They make beer and like to drink it outside, and the beer they make is awesome. And when they're not making or drinking their awesome beer outside, they're supporting some of the coolest projects and events in snow. The events start up on March 9th at Copper Mountain with the first of 3 Hella Big Air events. On March 23rd, there's the Goggle Tan Rail Jam at Ski Bowl. On March 30th, another Hella Big Air at Mount Bachelor. And the third and final Hella Big Air stop has been confirmed at Sierra at Tahoe on April 6th. So a lot of cool events. They also have Mike Bassich's Beer Cat, which is the first ever Snow Cat pub. So next time you're out buying beer, support the brand that supports you, the 10 Barrel Brewery. You can find out more about the events, their pubs, and the beer over at 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. You end up at a trade show in France, and you stumble upon a Black Crowes booth. It's like a chance meeting that changes the course of your life. And tell me about first seeing the Black Crowes brand.
I was in France with Julian, skiing with him and doing a bunch of photos and some filming and kind of Julian Renier backcountry freestyle type stuff and just really, really enjoying skiing. And he said, hey, I've got to go to a trade show, got to go to the Adidas booth because he was sponsored by them. And do you want to come? I said, yeah, sure. So I went to this trade show in France, and I remember being in the middle of all these people and all these stands and all these bright colors. And in the middle of all of that was just this little stand with this plain black wall and 2 skis on it. And there was like the lights were on these 2 skis. And one of them was gray and black, and the other one was black and pink. And they had this like really bold Helvetica logo that said Black Crowes on it. And these like diametrical computer-made graphics. Like it was really sharp and clean, and like it came out of a graphic design catalog. And in front of that, those skis was this like perfectly coiffed, very sort of stoic looking, extremely French guy, sort of standing just in front of the skis so the light would capture his face. So I remember seeing him as this sort of Messiah-esque looking person standing in their own light. And I remember thinking like, whoa, that is different. Because all the brands on either side were in the middle of that like late thousands art explosion where all the brands in ski followed skateboarding and snowboarding and said, if we're in the free ski movement, we have to have art on our skis and it has to be colorful. So it was this saturation of overtly stylized products all around you, total expression and attitude and whatever. And in the middle of that was this like sober, controlled, almost nostalgic looking thing, but that felt new. And I just remember going, whoa, like, what is that? That looks cool. And turns out it's a friend of Julian's named Camille. And so I met him and we got chatting a little bit. And he barely spoke English back then, but he had this idea that skiing could be something that you say that you do in your life. Like it could be part of culture, like surfing, where you say, I surf, I'm a surfer. Like that feels normal and you identify with that. And he felt that skiing had lost that. And he felt that skiing should be important and should be a part of your normal life, but should therefore feel a bit modern and a bit cooler. And I was like, wow, that's refreshing. It was a total contrast to the sort of X Games, super stylish, super artistic crayon watercolor type way of doing a ski brand back then. Yeah, it felt new and cool and fresh and sharp. And like, it just felt, I can't describe it as anything else than cool. And the way he explained what his idea was, I was just like, yeah, that would be great if skiing felt more important and you could actually identify as that. So we got talking, and in the end, I was somewhere in university and I hadn't spoken as much with K2 as recently. And I was in France and I thought, I want to join that. I want to use those skis and use that brand. So I ended up jumping ship. I took a pay cut from whatever I was getting from K2, I can't remember, to zero, because Black Crows just had 2 products and a couple of guys, and started using Black Crows.
And it was just all passion from there, right? You loved the skis, loved the product. Money didn't matter. It was about the belief in the brand.
I was in university then, and I was very much seeing a future where it was not about being a pro skier. So I was just taking my university breaks to go skiing. And luckily, I knew Julian well. So, I was looking to spend more time in France doing that stuff. And it just fit. So I started using their skis, which were pretty premature at the time, but I just really appreciated the brand. And I really was at a point where using a brand like that felt meaningful because I could make a contribution instead of being just one other person on the team. So yeah, fast forward 10 years from that and all the brands look like that today. Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is jump on and look at, maybe I shouldn't name the brands, but hey, why not? Volcal looks like Black Crows, Salomon looks like Black Crows, Zag looks like Black Crows, Blizzard looks like Black. You just have to line them up to see bright colors, geometric graphics, and the use of Helvetica Bold. And you see that actually the whole ski industry went from these kind of stylish, arty graphics to this sort of clean, computerized look. And Black Crows was the first brand that did that. And in 2006, to come out with a clean, fresh-looking brand was in itself a statement, even though today that's just normal.
So at this point in your life, you have a lot going on outside of skiing. This is into your Black Crows career where you're skiing for them for a few years. Then you start interning at legal firms, but in the ski world, you're still doing things. In 2011, you take 5th at the Red Bull Line Catcher, which is a big deal. You have a webisode series, the Rip Raw series with Rip Curl. I watched this whole series because I think you're a funny, funny dude, and I've been around you where you've made me laugh out loud. And I feel like this Rip Raw series didn't take advantage of your sense of humor. It didn't showcase how funny you are. And was that a conscious decision? Like, I'm going to be a lawyer and it's better if I don't show that side?
Well, I don't know. I definitely wasn't trying to be funny. I was trying to not try. And that series was just a very personal project with a buddy of mine named Rob, who has done cinematography for MSP and Poor Boys and TGR and a bunch of snowboard companies. And him and I just really felt like traveling to some places and making a small web series that would be made for YouTube, and Rip Curl sponsored it. So it gave us freedom to do whatever we wanted. And we wanted to be on a microphone during pretty much the whole thing. And just being on a microphone created moments which were, I wouldn't say it's funny really, that series at all.
No.
But natural. And I don't know, it's just skiing. And if anything, my time skiing has been too much about performance and not enough enjoyment. Looking back, I would love to have just had more fun and not worry about which event I can and can't go to and which shoot I can make and what schedule I need to do and when these contracts are and how this is going to fit together and am I on the right trajectory and this and that, and just enjoy it. And I think those years when I was using Black Crows skis and running that whole program and deciding to go to France and making a little film series where the skiing, a lot of it's pretty scrappy and some of it's okay, but it's just real. and you're mic'd up the whole time, and that's real too. And in the last years, I think I finally figured out how to do it and make that really feel rewarding. That's really important because there's people I know who were skiing in those competitions with me and filming who like pretty much don't ski anymore because they fell out of love with it. And I think that's a tragedy because skiing, ultimately, it's stickier than that. It's not like tennis. You don't just get into it for a year or two. It lives with you. And if you're really into it, it kind of defines you, and you should do it until you can't walk anymore. And those last years, getting to do what I wanted to do, even though it was less in the spotlight or less lucrative or less in the kind of rhythm of the industry, were ultimately the most fun. And they are the years that made me really happy that I had these chances at all, and I just enjoyed it.
The opportunities in the skiing, I would think, kind of fall to the wayside a little bit when you get your law degree, and then you end up becoming a litigation lawyer with Moray and Agnew. Is it hard for people to take you seriously when you look 15?
Probably. I look like a kid, for sure. Coming into the legal services industry in Australia, I worked for a large company called Clayton Utz and then another one called Moray and Agnew. And these were like hardcore law firms, 20-story buildings, glass exteriors, suit and tie, in court every day. And I'm like 24 years old, look about 16, blonde hair, wide-eyed, really, really junior. And I think they just ate me up the first 2 years that I was there. But, you know, you get your head around it. And I ended up doing 4 years as a lawyer, which was a very, very serious industry and a hell of a contrast to skiing. That really hit me. When you go from being good at something and being recognized for it and being credible and being well paid for it to coming in at ground zero in like a hardcore profession, being a nobody, really knowing not a lot and doing the dog's body of the work that's there, that's a really humbling experience. And I know a lot of people who have had sporting success try to transition to the real world, for lack of a better word, and have just been crushed by it. And it takes many years to get your head around that, you know, maybe you're not as special as you thought you were, and maybe things don't come as easily as they did when you were in sport.
How do you even fill that void that you had of just the adrenaline? Because I don't know if you get that in insurance law in court, but you got it every day when you were skiing, and now you're in a suit. Is there a way to fill that after work?
Well, basically, you work long hours as a lawyer, and it's very serious, and you actually bill by every 6 minutes.
Whoa.
So you time your work and document your work in 6-minute intervals. An hour is 1 unit, and 6 minutes is 0.1. So a letter to a client, that's 0.3, but it can't be 0.4 because they won't pay for that extra 0.1. It is intense.
Huh.
It is extremely time-bound and it's high pressure, and just all the work product you put out has to be at a very high level, otherwise clients won't pay for it. So you straight away into this very time-measured pressure cooker in an office all day, wearing a suit and tie, and meanwhile your whole life has told you that that's not the way to live, and suddenly you're doing it. So you live in cities. I was in Sydney, and you're just in total urban environment. So, you know, Friday night you go out for drinks at a bar with your colleague, and on Wednesdays you go for dinner with friends, and you go for a run at 5 p.m. and then come back at 6, and you go to this extremely structured life.
It sounds boring for you.
It was like a cage, and you end up just being alive on weekends and thinking about those weekends between Monday and Friday. Then you live for 2 days, and then you go back to this sort of like half-life status of just getting stuff done. It didn't take me that long to feel kind of like a physiological compulsion to just escape that. Like, I cannot describe it. Every part of my body was saying, Chris, this is not you. This is not the right thing for you. It wasn't mental. It was just coming from deep inside of me that you're in the wrong place. I can't describe misalignment in a way that can actually describe how I felt, but it was absolute misalignment with what I was doing versus who I was. Because I didn't really know who I was. You just kind of doing sport, then you go to university, then you jump into a profession, and you're just learning as you go. But I got to a point where I was just like, no, this can't work. I really liked the job and I really respected the profession, but something was wrong. And I just realized that I didn't care. Like, I didn't care about what happened to the clients I was representing. I didn't care about ultimately my performance. It didn't mean anything to me. It was like you're living at 80%. You can do 80. You can show up and get the job done, and you can work and do stuff. But if you're lacking that other 20%, then you'll never be the best version of yourself.
You'd be miserable.
Yeah. And I think today, like, if you want to have success and you want to have a big life, you need to be the best version of yourself. And if you want to be world class, the only way to do that is by really being passionate about what you do, because that's how you go beyond 100%, right? Because like when you discover that what you're doing is something that's deeply meaningful to you and you're motivated to do it, you realize that 100% is not 100%. You actually have a reservoir of surplus energy that you can tap into that makes you go beyond yourself every day of the week. And that's how you become world class. For me, it's got to a breaking point where I had a couple of buddies who said, we're going to Alaska for a month and we're going to take a plane and we're going to fly in and camp on this glacier unassisted. We're taking all our food in and we're going to ski and climb for a month. Do you want to come? And this was like 4 years into my legal career. And I was working in a firm where like, you don't get 4 weeks leave. You know, you might get a week at certain times of the year and 3 weeks out of the year max you can take off. But they do not give a junior associate a 4-week vacation. So they're like, well, that's not an option. And I guess you would have to resign. So I spent like a few weeks wondering, could I go? Like, could I say yes to this thing if I had to resign? And then I went surfing actually. And I remember sitting out in the water and the whole equation just flipped. And I was like, it shouldn't be, how could I go? Because I couldn't find the answer to that. The real question was like, how could I not go? And who would I be if I said no? What would that say about me? And am I happy with that person? And is that a future that I want for myself? From then on, it became super clear. I had to go. So I went into the office and I quit my job and said, I'm going on this trip. And it turns out they came down from their position and said, well, you know, you don't really have to quit and everything. But then, you know what? Like something changed in me from that point. I was like, you know what? I think I quit anyways. I'm going and I think I quit anyways. So I went to Alaska and ended up being like 7 weeks because we had weather problems and all sorts of stuff as per usual with Alaska. But I spent these 4 weeks out in a tent on a glacier, just being totally terrified and like totally focused on making water and getting food on and staying out of avalanches, not falling in holes and trying to weather storms and all the stuff you would do on this kind of Alaskan trip. And at the end of it, I remember thinking, wow, like the whole time I was just completely present and living really intentionally. And at the end, you kind of feel strong because you've been working a lot, walking long distances, climbing, sleeping in the cold. You're strong at the end. And I just remember coming back from that trip. I want my whole life to feel like those 4 weeks. I want to feel that sense of purpose and intention in everything I do. So I came back to Australia and I remember doing some work on a government investigation into bank fraud or something like that. Just a bit of work to kind of tie me over. And Camille, the guy who was standing in that trade show in front of the lights, in front of those 2 pairs of skis 10 years earlier, gave me a call because it was my birthday. And he's kind of nostalgic, you know, so he calls people on their birthdays. And he called me to wish me happy birthday. And I remember I was driving from Sydney to the mountains. And we were talking, and he was talking about how Black Crows had recently raised some money because it was just a really little garage brand then, but it was starting to get some growth. And they raised some money and they were looking for someone to do the marketing for it. And I did a business degree and a marketing thesis and that sort of stuff, but I never really had any like proper work experience doing it. But I just remember without even thinking saying like, I could do that. Yeah, it was almost automatic. I just kind of jumped at it. And he said, yeah, cool. Well, yeah, why not? That's interesting. Let's see. And I ended up having to interview with the board and there were several other candidates for the job more qualified than I was. But in the end, you know what happened? Julian and Camille came in super hard to bat for me and champion me so I could get the job. So it's thanks to those guys that I got a chance at Black Crows, which is crazy when you think of it.
And they knew that passion wins out. Like if you have 3 smart guys and 2 of those guys might be a little smarter or more marketing background than you, but you know everything about the industry and are so passionate about it. The passion, like you said, when you want to work, you're going to tap into that extra energy. You're going to work long hours and you're going to love what you're doing. And if you bring a guy in who's not a ski guy or is not as in tune as you are, you're not going to get as good of results as they did.
I guess you're right. And there's also just know-how. There's so many things that we just know and feel inherent to us that someone with an MBA who doesn't come from this industry wouldn't get. They would learn it, but it would take time. So I guess that was like a shortcut. But think about it. I was from Australia, 27 years old, unqualified, and didn't really speak French. So it was a massive risk that they took. And there was guys from Hilfiger and Gore-Tex and Nike who were candidates, and they passed on all of them to give me the job. So it was kind of a crazy moment in life. And it's really thanks to those 2 guys to really pull on the levers and get me that job that everything since has happened.
When you get the job, you have to move out to Chamonix. It's one of those places that brings people back, especially skiers, over and over. And I've never been there, but it's the pinnacle for skiers. Living there, is there a way to put what makes Chamonix so unique and why people love it so much?
Well, it's terrifying. Imagine you're taking a long-haul flight from Seattle. You get off the plane in an airport in a city, and 50 minutes later, you're just in amongst the most violent mountains you've ever seen.
Right.
And you're at 1,000 meters, and you're looking straight up, almost vertically, at these 3,000 and 4,000 meter peaks of just granite towers. And it's just like, how do you even ski here? How does that work? Like, where do you go? And then you see that there's lifts, and one of them in particular, the Aiguille du Midi, it's just a cable car that goes from the valley right to the top of one of the most pointiest granite peaks. And it's like this castle in the sky where the lift station is just embedded into the mountain. It's like something out of a James Bond flick. And, you know, you get on at 1,000 meters, and within 20 minutes, you're at 3,800 meters on top of like Fall You Die stuff. And you basically put your skis on and walk out. And it's just insane. Like, people from the US or who are not from France basically look at that and go, this isn't a ski area. You can't ski here. There's no fences. You can't even find a way down. And then you realize all these guys that get off with harnesses and a bunch of tools and axes and ropes with their skis on, getting ready to go out for their ski day. And these are not famous skiers. The US industry is built around making heroes out of people who would be terrified doing what these completely unknown locals just go out and do very casually, where they'll go and ski, 2,500 meters of vert, all in no fall zone with multiple rappels and ice screws and just all this crazy stuff. They're just local people, or they work in Geneva or Annecy, and they come and do this on a Saturday. So it's really, really, really intense. It's very dangerous. There's tons of ice, and it's just this kind of lab of craziness where these people come and spend time in this valley, in this like incredibly high energy place, and go up into these huge mountains and just go skiing. And the reality is people die every year, and like, that's weird to even get your head around when you come, like, 20 people are going to die this winter right now. Like, 20 people will be dead by the end of this winter, and you don't even know who they're going to be. But the chances are you will probably cross one of them this winter, and by the end of it, they'll be dead. Like, that's what the statistics say.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's morbid. And yet, once you get into these mountains here, if you know a few people and you take it step by step, it opens up to you. You go up these lifts and you find the routes, and you slowly get into it, and you realize that skiing can take on this whole new definition where it's not about skiing in a resort. It's about going to the top and then planning your day. And this vertical world kind of like opens up to you. And you sort of get into it slowly. And next thing you notice, it's 9 o'clock in the morning and you're casually lining up in the base queue of the Aiguille du Midi to go and ski like the heaviest thing you've ever done in your life, and you're really relaxed about it. And you can sort of fall into this rhythm of Chamonix style skiing that slowly hooks you in. And you realize that this is actually the best skiing you've ever done in your life, and you're doing it every day. And I think that's what makes Chamonix special, because it's incomparable to anywhere else in the world, because you can't do that anywhere else in the world.
Well, you're with Black Crows, you're the marketing director, but within a year, you become the commercial director because they believe in you. And it's time to start building the brand outside of France and really spreading it to a global reach. And they're looking to you to do this. And from what I've seen, it's a calculated seating program where you're going to pick the skiers in some resorts, Jackson Hole, maybe Squaw, I don't know where you're seating, but is that what you're thinking is, hey, we're going to get these skis that are totally different into the hands of some local heroes and people will start talking about Black Crows?
Yeah, well, the first thing when I arrived was just make marketing a bit of a thing. There was some cool posters and some cool imagery and a bit of branding, but I don't think we really did marketing, and we still don't really do marketing, I would say. But first thing was just to get a marketing budget together and a plan and digitize it. So get a new website and make a conscious choice about the platforms we use and start using these things properly to tell our story. And then once that process got settled, it took about a year. It was all about expansion, because Black Crows then was just in France and then had a couple of distributors in Europe buying it and reselling it, but really nothing else. And it was like, it's time to take this around the world and notably enter into the US. So we thought, well, how do you do what took us 10 years in Black Crows in about 3 years in the US? And it means you have to get shops to buy your brand, buy into your story and buy your products and take a risk on you. Yes, you have to do that. But you also have to create a brand and create demand for that brand. And the way to do that is through creating community and through being real. Like, I don't think the way marketing is done today is particularly good or particularly trustworthy, but I think that there's never been a better time to make a brand. And so what we did was we basically said, well, let's make this feel local. Like, we're from far away, and the story is clear. It's from Chamonix, it's French, it's graphic design, that's Black Crows. But let's make it feel local. So what we did was, in the first year, we said, well, let's go out and find 80 ski bums who are all friends, concentrated in the hubs in North America that matter. And let's give them all a pair of skis and say, it'd be really nice if you took some beers into the local ski shop and shook their hands. And that's what we did. And so we kind of created en masse and at scale an ambassador community of non-ambassador types. And they might be ski bums chopping wood in the summer, they might be working ski lifts, they might be working in the local ski shop, or they might be professionals who have their own businesses or are dentists or whatever. There was even a guy who sold his company to Adobe and now is a multimillionaire who lives in Whistler in a big house, who we sponsored. I don't know why we gave that guy free skis, but he was in there too.
By doing that and getting the right people on it, that gets the brand into stores? They brought beer in and it worked?
Well, it wasn't just beer. It was that feeling that Black Crows was around the first stores who gave us a shot, that Black Crows was present in their town and that they were sending their friends in and people were coming in to demo skis and creating that feeling that Black Crows is here even before you took your risk really helped. And then on top of that, we decided to do something which we had never done in Black Crows, which was sponsor a pro. Black Crows was never about having that team of people with Monster Energy drink and Red Bull helmets on their head and saying, this is our team, this is our brand bias, we're awesome, we're extreme. There was no pros. We've never run an ad with a pro skier with their name on it doing performance. It's always been this sort of brand with this community and no one is higher or bigger or better than the other. And what we did was that basically from the beginning by making it about locals who invest in their skis and who care about it and who understand the value of getting a free pair of skis. And what we did was basically try to create culture and make that felt by the retailers. But then we took a different path when we sponsored Michelle Parker, Mark Abmer, Callum Pettit, and Christina Lustenberger all in the same year. So this is something we'd never done before. And we went straight to these guys and said, we're going to North America. We are going to be there. It's our absolute intention. And we want to know if you're interested in joining us on this journey. And it just so happened that they were all at the right time in their careers to do that. And they all jumped on board. And that actually let us leapfrog those early stages of brand awareness because these guys are in a way like the last legends of the ski industry. Christina is a little bit newer to the scene, but Mark and Michelle in particular, but also Callum, are in a way the last generations before ski films started being fragmented up into social media and locally made productions and individuals and stuff.
They're the High North crew that still are pro.
Yeah, it's a generation of icons. There was a concentrated group who were in a couple of films every year that everyone saw. And since social media and self-made production has become more and more the norm in the ski industry, we've sort of lost those icons in a way of skiing, which the ski film industry made happen so well. And Mark and Michelle are part of that generation and are still very relevant today. So by joining with them, we were able to generate brand awareness really, really quickly. So imagine in all the kind of ski towns that we felt mattered for the brand, having an army, I don't like that word, but having an army of ski bums and local people who are friends and who ski together and who talk to the shops and who get their friends involved in Black Crows. Having that plus a couple of pros to generate that higher level awareness really accelerated Black Crows in the consumer mindset. So it was about getting stores to sign up and telling their stories and supporting them. And at the same time, really thinking about the consumer and creating culture as quickly as we could around Black Crows. And today, when I go to the US and I hear people talk about Black Crows, it's like it's theirs. And it doesn't feel far away. It doesn't feel foreign. People don't even know it's French. And I think that's a real success because most brands who come from Europe to the US fail.
Yeah.
It's a dismal record because they can never come across. They can never tell their story and be themselves, but also be relevant to people living in the US or Canada. And the way we welcomed culture by adopting local communities and at the same time doing the pro thing, I think really let us embed very quickly into the US market.
Well, that's why they hired you instead of the Gore-Tex or the Nike guy, because you realize that that's how you're going to penetrate a market and do it the right way. And it's worked. So we've talked a lot about your career and life and times, and we know your career is changing. It's going to Awayco from Black Crows, and a huge loss for Black Crows, but they will re-up and probably be fine because you left them in a good spot. But putting you in a bad spot, hopefully, is a friend of yours, Christian Sirianni. And I had Christian come up with 3 inappropriate questions for you, and I'm going to cue the first one up.
There was an event called the Rip Curl Free Ski Pro at Mount Hotham. The 2002 one, I think, is the one I'm thinking of, and he was there with his dad, Paul. And I would just be curious to get some details about what happened with him and his dad the night that they both went out and got a little bit drunk together and they were staying in the same room. So maybe just a little bit of an explanation of what they woke up to the next morning.
Did you get to hear that one?
Yeah, I heard it. First of all, thanks for putting me in touch with Christian. I haven't heard from him for a while.
I updated him on what you're doing, and he was really genuinely psyched to talk about you, and yeah, he loves you.
Well, I remember the event. I think I was 14 years old. Can't remember the year, but I was 14 years old. It's the Rip Curl Free Ski Pro at Mount Hotham, and I won the event. And the event had an after party that was sponsored by Southern Comfort. I think that's like spiced rum or something. And my dad was there, and basically my dad smuggled me drinks all night and got me really drunk at this party. And I remember getting so drunk that I think my dad had to like take me back to the room where we were staying and just passed out. And I think he went back out because he was a bit of a party animal. And in the morning, I realized that I was so drunk. I woke up and I'd wet the bed. And I was like, oh, Dad, I think something bad happened. And then he looked at me and he's like, oh, you'd never guess, but I think I wet the bed too. So yeah, 2 generations, both getting blind drunk and both bedwetters.
That is pretty amazing. I do have to bring up from that, one of your athletes, Callum Pettit, was on the podcast not so long ago, and he told a story about being on one of his first film trips and being in a tent and having his first wet dream, which I would share because wetting the bed kind of reminded me of that.
In a way, that's kind of heavier.
Yeah, totally. And he said that he told the guys on the shoot, they're like, oh, how was last night? He's like, I had a wet dream.
Oh, Callum. Oh, my God, that guy.
He's a fun one. So here's question number 2.
Something that I always go back to, and I feel like as part of the K2 family, we all unite over this one evening back in, I would have to say it was probably the 2004 or 2005 US Open. And K2 had hired a massive house. Were you there, pal? You were there, right? I feel like this was the time when you just started doing the ski stuff.
They made a mistake and they sold us the wrong house, and they tried to get their money back from me months later, but they couldn't.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah.
That is so good. Okay, good. Well, that even makes it better. So I just would like to hear what Chris's recollection of that night would be. We had one night, I think it must have been after the slope style, so most of the athletes at the house were done with their competition duties, and I feel like it's one of those nights that we all have a fairly different recollection of the event. But I would just like to know who was there in Chris's mind, what were some of the events that stood out, and how much impact has that left on him? Because I feel like for me and so many other people that I know, it seems to bring out some pretty funny stories from time to time.
So do you remember the night that Kristen's talking about?
Yeah, I remember it, but I think I get out of jail free on this one. We had this huge house at the US Open, can't remember what year, the K2 house. And I remember one night after the event, everyone was there. I think I remember Seth was there, and Pep, and Andy Mayer, and like Chris Benchetler, Sean and Callum Pettit, Christian Sirianni was there, and like a whole cast of crew. And then basically everybody else from that contest came over. And I remember it just being a huge party. But I actually think I was the party pooper, and I think I went to bed pretty early, and things really kicked on after that. So I think my story is pretty plain Jane compared to what I'd like to know what Christian knows.
Well, I can't get you that answer right now, but we can try to get that for a later podcast. But it sounds like you were not the fun one that night, and that question turns out not so inappropriate, but that's okay. We will jump into our final question.
If you had to choose between having sex or skiing in the rest of your life, not for the rest of your life, but if you had to exclude one of those, what would you choose to keep and what would you choose to exclude?
And I'm going to put an asterisk on that sex, masturbation, any kind of ejaculation is off the table unless it's a wet dream. So would you pick skiing or ejaculation?
That's a really tough question because both of those activities bring me like really profound happiness.
One lasts longer.
I don't know. I'd have to say it's pretty hard to give up skiing. The question rephrased differently. Would you take a vow of celibacy for skiing? And the answer is yes. Ultimately, if I had to, I would do it. It's skiing that I couldn't absolutely live without.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a tough question, and that's your answer, and that's impressive. And Chris, I want to thank you for your time. For me, it's been really cool to see your career because I saw you as a young competition athlete who then transitioned into being a lawyer, who then transitioned into running one of the coolest brands in skiing. And now you're going to do this whole new startup thing that is not just a startup because it exists. It's a totally different path and it's a new way of getting skis and should be pretty exciting to see how Awayco grows because I've already seen them on my social feeds and I'm sure everybody else will be seeing them soon as well.
Yeah, thanks, pal. I really appreciate your time. And I hope that you keep doing this and hope that it can continue. Yeah, it's a real contribution. It's funny when you look back at this like stuff that we've been doing, these brands that we've worked on and the times we've had and like this culture that was born and then was like built up to think about what is your contribution to that ultimately. And, I think what you're doing is a really good example of how to keep it going, right? Because culture, it only happens when people actually organize it a little bit. Otherwise, there's nothing.
So that was time with Chris Booth, and it is really cool to see what he has done with his career because he started as an athlete who was a student. He was focused on doing well in school, and he was going to have a great career as a lawyer, but he realized that if he's not following his passion, he's not really living. And to take the job with Black Crows and create the marketing program that he did, he built a program in North America with a French company that is a tough thing to do. It's really hard to be successful because for some reason over here, we don't respect the French brands as much as they're respected in Europe. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's freedom fries. Who knows? But Chris was able to shed the stigma of being a French company. But the crazy thing is, at the trade show I was at, you could look at every ski brand out there pretty much, and they were influenced by Black Crows about 2 years ago. It was all lines, color blocking, stripes, and it is all attributed to what Black Crows is doing. I'm sure no one will admit that, but when you look at skis coming out next year, think back to the past few years of what Black Crows has done, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. So great talking with Chris. I don't get to talk to him enough, and I really didn't talk to him that much when I was at K2, but that was maybe me being a poor team manager working with an Australian who was very far away. As always, I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. Tell your friends about the show and review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. I also want to thank my amazing sponsors who make the show happen. They are Evo, Rescue Water, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Spy Optic. Have a great week, everyone.